I've been assigned to the sawmill division, which I'm super excited about. I've spent most of my time at WorkSafe involved with the training of the safety officer, what they learn, think about, and how vested in that. Management's kind of a self-confessed safety nerd, and people like to the regulation. And as I'm working on section of part 12, that's all we talk about is we're writing the regulations, is what is the, I'm also pretty good buddies with Mike Tasker, who's working on the combustible dust regulations. They're also talking risk assessment. Officers are talking about, risk-based inspections. That pretty much whatever be a talk about what's the risk, what's the hazard, what are we looking at? So let's take a jump in. Hopefully everything works. Yay, it's all working. If you guys have any questions at any time, by all means, see the chat. Hold on, I'm going to turn it on. But I've got 3 screens going all at once, so by all means, just jump in, interrupt me. I'll do that. So we're going to, what does a risk assessment look like and the management? Sorry, somebody trying to jump in? Okay, and then we're going to talk about risk-based inspection, like the type of inspections that you've been where an officer's coming in looking for compliance, where going forward it's going to be a more risk-based approach and the conversation you have with them. So I want to know what's coming as far as that goes. Any questions so far? Anyone? All right. Oh, yes. And Tammy is reminding me that we are. So let's talk about risk. So the realities of risk. Everybody has risk in their cause harm to their employers and determine if reasonable steps are being taken to prevent that harm from happening. Your workplace cause harm to your work. Determining whether you're taking steps, is, what is dangerous. So the most dangerous things is when I work, I think about my work day and what I need to get done. And that's crazy because I'd have what I called, but was have a whole lot of recollection of leaving my house and getting to work. I was just on autopilot, especially after doing it for 25 years, twice a day. A hazard is a person to a risk or injury. So in this case, it's the shark, right? What the hazard is that the shark might eat me. So, what am I, so hazards, you want to protect the worker. You want to find, do you have moving parts? Do you have chemicals that you use? All those. A hazard is anything that can cause there a chance that the workers could get hurt. Is that chance high, medium, or low? If somebody gets hurt, how serious is it to them? So I know we're going to chat about, let's talk about this. So, what are your hazards? And if anybody jump in then? No? All right. Well, let's talk about some different types of risks then. You're quite crude consequences, right? The first aid reports or in sawmills and manufacturing are injuries. Sorry, I'm just looking at the risk. Yeah, and I'll show you some of the stuff that we have. We've got some great resources for sure. By all means, Tony, thanks for the question. Potential mobile equipment. I read yesterday there was a forklift that fell over. As I mentioned, I'm on the safeguard. The explosions that we saw with the combustible dust, they're very widespread. They're ones that are not aligned with risks and not easily detected through the normal signals such as claims data or WorkSafe inspections. It's interesting, my display is changing around like crazy over here. So any questions about types of risk? Okay, so let's talk about how to assess them, because Tony, you were asking me about this. So this is one of the ways that you can start to do that. You want to determine what's the likelihood. So say, for instance, the likelihood of someone getting hurt during that time, right? So if it's fairly high because it's an unusual, maintenance is considered one of the riskiest times during work because it's things that are being done that are different. So, you want to look at, will the results determine the sufficient control measures are in place? Do you feel comfortable knowing that you have that person protected? So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and seeing how you're all a little bit quiet, I believe that you all have reaction buttons. I'm wondering if you could give me a thumbs up on if you think managing risk is an important activity for every employer. Do you think you guys have play a role as employers? Is it important?
I just can't find the button.
Oh, okay. So can we shut out? I feel
there today. You.
Oh, good. It this way, right?
But for the question for Tony, there's different type of assessment that.
So let's talk important, right? Well, it makes good business sense. So by managing risk effectively, employers are able to reduce health and safety hazards, injuries, reputation, which I always think is a huge one, to come and work with you. Obligated to ensure health and safety of their workers, right? The Act in Section 2, which means you need to effectively control risk. So this is where we're going to get a few people to shout out. So do you think as an employer you can eliminate risk completely from your workplace? Yes or no? What do you think?
Absolutely not.
Else? Yeah, I agree, right? In the real world, organizations have limited resources, right? Right. This is why it's important for employers to take a risk-based approach to managing the risks in their workplace. So what does that mean? What does that? So we care that employers have their basics well aligned, provide the maximum value and reliability. So meaningful worker engagement. This is the cornerstone of what WorkSafe is. You're going to be promoting and demonstrating the value of worker engagement in addition to confirming the healthy function of a joint health and safety committee, right? You're going to use your committee to help work on support ongoing hazard ID and risk assessment, right? Development of your robust culture for activities. Right, require formal occupational health and safety committees. I'm speaking to a lot of these kind of employers these days. They're a little bit smaller, definitely some risk. We're spending on health and safety committee and do it even on a smaller basis. Does anybody have any questions about why it's important to engage in workers or? No? Okay, I'll keep talking then. So this is what you're asking about, Tony. What people might be harmed. Are all of the workers exposed to it? Just a small number? You know, is it over here? Is it everybody? Right? What, you know, how long are you, the longer the exposure, right? How frequent is the exposure? You know, you think about something like, I don't know, maybe silica dust, right? Is someone cutting every day? Are they using a water saw? Are they, you know, all here as to whether you think, yeah, this will jump in. So scenario one, you have a senior manager who control inspection by walking through a workplace on normal risk of this task is. You can put it in the chat or you can jump in. Low. Yep, low. For sure. It's low, right? You've got good, absolutely. Falls into the tougher one. You can put it in the chat if you like. Medium. Medium. Yeah, I agree that stuff is it. Third one. So remember I mentioned about maintenance earlier. That was a clue. When maintenance energized equipment, what do you think? Yeah. High. Definitely high. High. Thank you for playing with me, guys. Okay, let's. Some of you that are familiar with Safety Management Act type of or on our work site. So sometimes you'll need to identify and assess risks together. So sometimes you see them labeled as one category, but let's absolutely involve workers in risk-based process. Unique experience and knowledge that workers should be asked to identify the hazard them at risk, and workers should also be asked to come up with the potential ways to control risk. So they know better than anyone looking to the workers. Okay, so where can you look for hazards? So equipment manuals, operations, maintenance, they contain a great deal of safety data Documents contains, right? Consultant reports are also a great place. They provide related to hazards in workplace that can include valuable risk assessments and control information. Example noise today. Data sheets, we all know that they're required and they have a lot of information on them. Everybody's done their women's training, I assume, and that's where you'll learn a lot about safety. They can provide information, certain procedures. They're required when workers may be exposed to hazardous materials and substances, as you know. Other examples include inspection reports, use of risk areas in areas pretty safe, right? It's a building. And I worked in the basement and I kept tripping over this. There's actually a crack in the foundation and there was water up into a solid material and it was actually pushing the foundation up of the building. So had I not said, hey, spot, he has unlimited the mold, right? You need to prioritize them and you need to identify the appropriate controls. Equal treatment with respect to the safety regulations is a set of minimum hazard controls. So to deal with the risks that have been most so they're going to have you identified your risks associated with your operations. That's why I kind of wanted to get into a bit of a chat about that to help you get used to talking to the officers about that. If your workers have a way, or is it just the way I work? Process. If you have an effective committee, they are super great to work with. Examples of now the officer not is just a sampling for you to from the employers that they understand what the hazards are in their workplace. The employers know what the hazards are. Any questions on that? Let's talk about. So one of the things you want to do are all the factors identified. Risk controls can be applied to reduce the risk of implementing risk controls will result in by the organization. Earlier that there's different ways that you can measure the impact rate. Has that gone down? Your disease, so about reputation. I always think reputation if you can. So on the slide here is a few things to consider. And I'm going to hand this slide deck over to you guys. I've currently in duration, located in a confined space, education and training. Please don't rely just on education and training. A lot of areas do, and it doesn't work out so well. There's lots of steps. You need to think about when you're applying controls is that you might knock out another control. So you might have another hazard and another risk that's working great, and you put something new in and that affects something over here. So I do have a stage where we talk about monitoring. So that's what existing control measures means. So, and how dangerous is the equipment, are we under kinetic energy or not, right? Anytime you guys have any questions, jump in. So what I've tried to do is in each section that we're going to go through with those little bubbles, I've added a slide at the end where the officers will be seeking to understand. Your conversation is going to be looking for evidence, understood the characters of the risk. The Joint Health and Safety Committee. So the questions, they're going to be looking at is how have you assessed? Is it present? Is it always present? Or is it just chill at one point? And shift change was very dangerous time for us. So that's something that we used to consider, right? Who specifically is at risk? Is it all the workers or just one worker or maybe 3 or 4 workers, right? And has the Health and Safety Committee taken a good look at the assessment and decided that was a good one? Okay, so everybody's favorite part, we want to implement the measures and control the risk. Correct unsafe work conditions for sure. Critical control is a control that is critical to preventing the event or mitigating the occurrence or consequences of the event. It prevents more than one unwanted event or mitigates more than one consequence. The absence or failure of a critical control significantly increases the risk despite the existence of other controls. That means like lockout, test steps, those kind of things. It's important to know that a critical control is only as effective as the health and safety system that supports it. So we have seen lots of incidents where they have all kinds of controls in place, but they're not being used or followed, right? So a good example is a lockout procedure for energized equipment, verification of absence of energy once lockout is performed, right? It's critical how to verify the absence of energy, right? Another one would be a designated or segregated walkway for a pedestrian. That would be an example of a critical control. Any questions? Anybody want to supply an example of a critical control that they use that they think is pretty cool? All right. I really enjoy when I talk to employers on the phone that they like to talk to me about this cool stuff that they're doing and the innovative stuff that they're doing. So, okay, when it comes to controlling the risk, you know, your officers are going to be looking for a few things. You're going to have established that you have a hazard and there's an associated rules. So, on or were decided, you know, in whose selection, you know, has policy and procedures been developed, right? So, these types of questions will be, again, around how have you, it'll be a lot of how questions, right? How have you done this? How have you determined it? You know, any questions? Have any of you had an officer come in and do this kind of inspection yet? Well, it's really important to communicate. You know, if you employ a new or a young worker, they're special and there must be an orientation to their risk. You must also, for the first, I would really appreciate if, he's going to jump in head first, and his favorite line to his mom is, "Nobody needs another safety lesson, Mom." So he's the kind of young worker. Risk management programs, well, they seem to know their job. You know, those are the kind of questions that you need to dig in a little bit deeper more than just, did you read it? Answers, right? Right. So advisors may need additional training work and why they're in place. As long as they know the why, and if they don't agree with the why, then your supervisors are going to get pushed back, extra consideration and questions, because there's quite a few of them. And please jump in if you have any questions. All right, so moving around our circle, now we have a monitor and update. So you want to measure of this with manpower due to people needing to isolate. The effect of the controls for combustible dust due to the dust collections, increase in fires in the dust collection, taking care of it, and they'd always have people in place. But now there's a new process and they make sure that it fits all the way through, right? Introduced a new hazard. It didn't equate for the adjustment, and the height of the weight adjustment would probably not be correct. And if you had a short worker, that also might not be good for them. So it was just something that they had to consider and react to. So here's some of the questions I'm going to ask you about ongoing monitoring and looking for evidence that you know followed, and the Health and Safety Committee is actively involved. Right? It's critically important changes, like I mentioned, like catastrophic events have happened due to a change not recognized as having a potential to cause harm. So this is one of the most critical stages. Is there any questions about risk and hazards? Because we're going to move into sort of compliance versus risk-based inspections. And then at the very end, I will talk about resources for you. Okay.
Tammy?
Yep.
One of the things I think is important is, how do employers that have multiple work locations share something that they've learned, whether it be through an incident investigation or a new risk they've identified, with their other workplaces to ensure that they also have that same level of understanding and can take appropriate action? So I think this is very relevant to this group, at least for those who have multiple locations. And I'm curious to see if anyone has any best practices they can share.
Great question, Megan. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Hi, it's Bill Laternis here from the BC Forest Safety Council. We have a weekly subscription for safety alerts. So the industry shares safety alerts within their own organizations, but we also share safety alerts that are sent to us by different operations. We sanitize them to take out any identifying information for either location or people that are there. And we send it out to everybody that's on the subscription list.
Nice. Have an incident, up a formal report on it, so that you can review, right?
Yeah, we've tried to do that in the past so that we can send something out that's relevant to the industry.
Awesome. If I
work site, we're now down to only one work site, but we have all the managers from all the divisions to discuss and we all have a safety alert.
That's awesome. Be fit.
Happen in any of the other sites, right?
And have you guys come across anything where you sort of
Like pineapple rolls, the board come through all the pineapple rolls in all the locations, not only just like at the planer, but in different areas of the.
Great. Anybody else? Finding out this stuff is really my favorite part of my job, because then the next employer I talk to, I can say, hey, I talked to this or they bought this. So let's talk about what, obviously, an officer will still be looking for non-compliance. Absolutely. But this discussion will be focused on knowledge of the hazards, the risks, and the controls, and what you can do about it. You know, as officers go from people, outcomes is have an understanding and a desire to manage the risk. Right, your workers are engaged. It's going to improve your perception. Anytime you do leadership training, they talk about, you know, the people and the worker, and it's, you know, yourself, you know, when your boss pays attention to you and you feel like you're heard, it just your attention ahead of time, which I think it's really great. Actually, if you have questions, like if you've been working on it and an officer comes in for an inspection, please feel free to ask the role, which is what it is to ensure as you can, because at the end of the day, if the employer is well positioned, then the workers are safe, right? So all those little young every day, and everybody's going to be happy and affect the purpose of the officer that's there. So you may get one inspection report related to risk management basics. So it'll be around the committee look like a G you might hear. It will give you a step-by-step approach, and I think Sylvie also has some stuff, so she'll jump this story for your places, because if everybody feels safe to report and comfortable to talk to you, you're going to find out a lot more information. Sylvie, did you want to jump in here about Tony's question? Sylvie, if you're talking, you're on mute. Okay, she may have had to step away. All right, so I always like to have fun with these things, and I want to challenge you, and I would like to have the opportunity to maybe see if after this presentation, you take a different look at your workplace. And if you continue or start, do you think you guys could do that? A safety meeting about what keeps you up at night? What makes you think at night, like you wake up in the middle of the night and you're, you know, worried, right? What is that?
I am. Well, it's great to be here, and this is a great presentation and so core to so much of what the board work involves. And again, key areas that, you know, again, maybe are not new to you, but again, fresh perspective, really want to engage workers and employers across the province in these discussions. And again, the commitment that we're asking for, again, it's right on the screen in front of us in terms of making a difference. Appreciate your thoughts, appreciate your feedback, appreciate your input, and really appreciate Tammy walking us through this. You did a wonderful job, and I know it's not easy to sit with all of us absorbing and not commenting. So if you do want to turn on your cameras, just in terms of a shout out to everyone, I know it takes a lot, again, for these presentations to happen, and Tammy did a wonderful job in sharing these concepts. So again, if anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your comments on really any way to make the training better or different. If there's other suggestions, we're always open. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Susanna.
Hi, it's Marla. Thanks for the presentation. It was great.
You're welcome.
I think it is. I think when you have people on camera, it is easier because you can see that they're paying attention and listening instead of just talking to your empty screen, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah, I miss being in the room too.
Yeah, for sure.
Appreciate your input though, Marla. That was great. Thank you.
Phone issues, isn't able to jump back on, but to reach out any questions. So if you want to do that and you don't have her email, just go through Tammy at this point in time, and she can make sure that you get access to that. But we are here as a resource to you at WorkSafeBC. And the last comment I put in the chat box was just letting everyone know that sometimes we look at those resources as health and safety professionals or operators, and we just consume them for ourselves. But don't forget that sometimes there's valuable information in there that can actually help enhance the knowledge that your workers and Joint Health Safety Committee members bring to the table, and having more fulsome conversations and develop by sharing them. So please feel free to share them with your teams as well.
Yeah, that would be great. And if you have stuff you want to share, call me as well, because we talk to a lot of them for sure. The other thing is if you have any suggestions on further topics that you'd like to hear about, I'm all ears. I'm close off with, or then I'll give you 10 minutes of your time back and see if she had anything else that she wanted to add to your